Hello, my name is Taya Graham, and welcome to the Police Accountability Report. This is a breaking news update for a case we've been following as we have obtained exclusive footage of a cop lying about an arrest and potentially ruining someone's life in the process. Get out. It's an example of police malfeasance that is particularly destructive. The fraudulent arrest and imprisonment of a young man based upon false testimony. And it is a prime example of why the purpose of this show, holding police accountable, is imperative. But before we get started, I have to ask you to please like, comment, and share our videos. We need your help to get the message out. And if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us. You can email us privately at par@therealnews.com, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the Police Accountability Report, or follow us on Twitter at Eyes on Police. And of course, you can message me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Facebook and Twitter. And you know I read your comments and appreciate them, so please comment. Now, back to the exclusive body cam footage. The case involves Baltimore police officer Michael O'Sullivan. He testified under oath during a trial that Baltimore resident Yusef Smith possessed a gun. The claim led to Smith's incarceration for several months, where he was facing multiple charges of gun possession and perhaps decades in prison. But there was one flaw in the case: the body camera footage. Prosecutors from the Office of Baltimore State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby reviewed the footage and discovered that O'Sullivan had lied. In other words, as we've seen in a myriad of other cases, police were caught on their own cameras committing crimes, despite the fact they knew the cameras were on, which is why the Police Accountability Report filed a formal Public Information Act request to view the footage, which led to his conviction. And this footage reveals what led prosecutors to charge O'Sullivan with committing a crime. So let's watch. And while we watch, Stephen, can you explain what we're seeing?
Okay, so Michael O'Sullivan and several other officers were called to the scene because some young men were playing dice. And also, during that period of time, someone also says someone might have a gun, although we're not really sure about that. So as you're watching the body cam footage now, you can see the officers arrive on the scene. And what we'll do is we'll focus in on something very interesting. Michael O'Sullivan, the police officer, goes down into the stairwell to look around to see where the game was being played. His fellow officer walks past this gun. But as this is all unfolding, and we'll show you this right now, you can see the person they eventually charged running about 100 yards away. Okay, so let's watch that, focus in that slowly. So now you can see that while he is running, Michael O'Sullivan is down in this alley. Right. And he is looking around.
Right, in this little stairwell that he really can't see out of.
Can't see anything. Yeah. And then we see the body cam footage again. Let's watch. He walks past the gun. And then at the same time, they have detained Yusef Smith, who is the person who they eventually charged. I would say a couple hundred yards away from where the gun was found. But Michael O'Sullivan says and testifies that he saw Yusef Smith drop the gun, right? He saw him toss the gun. So now, when you're seeing this footage, you can see it's absolutely impossible that he saw him drop the gun. Now you say, what's the big deal? The gun was there. But the point is that that is illegal. Yes. You can't, so O'Sullivan didn't just say, I saw him drop the gun. O'Sullivan went into a courtroom, testified against Yusef Smith. And of course, Yusef Smith was then convicted of possession of a handgun, which is a huge crime in this. And there's mandatory minimums with many times with handgun convictions. So he actually completely fraudulently made up this story. And so it's very interesting as you see the footage, and we're gonna keep showing it kind of different aspects of it, but this arrest unfolded over a long period of time. But one thing was very clear from all the footage: you could not see, Michael O'Sullivan could not see what he said he saw. So he straight up lied under oath in a trial over a young man's life, you know, who we learned lost his job, lost his living where he was living, had to move back in, I think, with his family, destroyed the young man's life. So this is, I think, extremely exemplar of the problem we have. Yes, we have crime in places like Baltimore. In fact, this took place right near our house. But the point is that it's not solving anything if police have no integrity. I mean, the lying and the repercussions of the lying are monumental and profound.
O'Sullivan was indeed convicted of misconduct and giving false testimony, crimes so grievous he himself was sentenced to 15 months in prison. Stephen, how rare is it for an officer to receive jail time?
Well, it's very rare because we just covered the trial of Baltimore police officer Michael Gentile, who was convicted of possession of a handgun while committing a felony, which comes with a mandatory 5-year minimum sentence. But the judge gave him an appeal bond, meaning that he could go home and wait and serve out his sentence at home, not in prison, while he was waiting for his appeals to run through the court system, the appeal of the conviction. So in that case, almost every other person would have been put in jail for 5 years.
Also, don't prosecutors sometimes actually hold back exculpatory evidence to help officers? I mean, there were just 3 men who had spent 36 years in prison
Right.
for falsely imprisoned, innocent, completely innocent of a crime because a prosecutor and police officer worked together to hide evidence. So don't
Yeah.
sometimes
Well-
things like this body camera footage actually not get used in court?
Why I think this case is so important is it illustrates something that's very different now in Baltimore City. I think 10 years ago, this kid would have served out 7 or 8 years in prison and nothing ever would have happened to exonerate him. However, Baltimore State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby is one group of a couple or maybe half a dozen progressive prosecutors in cities like St. Louis, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, who are saying no. We can no longer abet police misconduct and the false imprisonment of African Americans and people in cities like Baltimore. And so what's unusual about this is that the prosecutors actually went through the body camera footage, found it, and then prosecuted him. And
That's highly unusual.
And since Marilyn Mosby has been elected to office, I think she's prosecuted like 50 some odd police officers,
over
which is
55.
unprecedented. Never happened in Baltimore before. Never happened ever. So how many people are in for these kind of gun crimes? I mean, the Gun Trace Task Force, which is a group of 8 corrupt officers, were notorious for planting guns on people.
Exactly.
I think this case points to the concept of the proximity crime that we've seen as a result of the drug war. The psychology of police officers, that being proximate to an object, like a bag of something or a little marijuana, makes you a criminal? Or is it a way to apply blanket criminality to a community? Here's a gun, we're gonna put it on somebody. What's the big
Right.
deal?
Right.
It doesn't matter if we didn't see him. And it shows how the process of evidence and justice has been warped by racist and unconstitutional policing in cities like Baltimore. He didn't care. He wasn't like, I don't have to see someone have this gun. We have a young African-American man. We have a gun a couple hundred yards away.
We're just going to put them
We're
together.
just gonna put them together.
And
Why
we
not?
don't care at all whether or not
You know,
that young man actually owned that gun.
And of course, just like the Gun Trace Task Force, they booked a stat and said, look, we found a gun.
Right.
I'm sure the police department sent out a press release saying a gun was recovered from a felon or something, or
Right.
so it just shows how warped. People don't understand Baltimore City is not a constitutional city. It is a city that does not operate under the auspices of the Constitution. It operates fully under the control and power of a totally corrupt police department that completely and unequivocally ignores the law. So, welcome to America, right?
But of course, like many of these cases, little attention is paid to the victim. We reached out several times to Mr. Smith, but he did not respond. But nevertheless, we have had multiple guests on the show who have been a victim of baseless charges. In fact, we spoke extensively last week to an auditor who was charged with trespassing for filming the exteriors of police cars. And of course, there is Baltimore's Gun Trace Task Force. You know, what's interesting is that now that we've reached out with the Police Accountability Report to speak to people in other states,
Right.
we thought Baltimore City had the most corrupt police department, but it turns out that there are a lot of other communities that have corruption, that have police officers violating people's civil liberties, that have police officers not respecting the Constitution.
Yes.
So even though Baltimore City may uniquely be corrupt, there is corruption to be found in many other communities in their police departments.
Well, let's remember Blind Justice's story out in Washington State, who was just protesting on the 4th of July. A veteran,
A
disabled
veteran on the 4th of
was
July.
arrested for protesting on the 4th of July, protesting police brutality, or police trying to, I guess, infringe upon his constitutional rights to protest, which is what he fought and got injured for.
Right. Police have extraordinary, often devastating powers. They can end your life, or they can ruin it, shoot you, or imprison you. Every single person who wears the badge is vested with these incredible powers. That's why the process of holding them accountable is so important. That's why we have to take the time to obtain this body camera footage and expose it in detail, and why we will continue to report, ask tough questions, and generally expose police when they abuse the public trust. I would like to thank my reporting partner, Stephen Janis, for joining me today and for his invaluable reporting. And I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us and we might be able to investigate. Please reach out to us. You can email us tips privately at par@therealnews.com. Share your evidence of police misconduct. And of course, you can message me directly at Tejas Baltimore on Twitter and Facebook. And please do like and comment on our videos. I do read your comments and appreciate them. And you know when I can, I respond to them. My name is Taya Graham, and I want to thank you so much for joining us for this exclusive Police Accountability Report.